Hi, it's so nice to be here with you today. Transformation isn't easy. I'm Nancy Phelan, and I head up the Omnichannel Activation Business Unit at Indegene. I'm really excited to talk to you today about driving adoption of new platforms and approaches, and really digging a little bit deeper on Metaverse and really understanding, what does it take to lead today and be ready to be future-proof tomorrow. I'm really excited to introduce my really wonderful panelists. I'm joined by two wonderful people. The first one is Josh Chapman, and he is a daring pioneer. He heads up clinical learning and excellence, both globally and for the US at AstraZeneca. And I'm also really excited to introduce a dear friend of mine and former colleague, prognosticator of the future, Ashish Sharma, who is an executive director and drives data and platform commercialization excellence at Novartis. One of the things that I'm most impressed about is that not only do we have a lot of expertise and experience on this panel today, but without a single moment of coordination, all three of us as life sciences executives knew to wear the mandatory blue shirt. It's complementary with the Indegene branding colors. So there you go. Not much more you need to say about the leadership and the energy and the professionalism we're going to have in our panel today. So really excited to talk to you today and really introduce what I think is the next big idea in healthcare and talk to our experts to understand their experience and their knowledge in terms of how we should be thinking about it, how we should be assessing engagement, and what it takes to really drive transformation in our respective organizations in service of patient outcomes and better healthcare impact. And so with that, I'm going to ask if we can bring up our slides, and we're going to get started and really spend some time talking about mastering Metaverse, or at least getting started on that journey. So if we can go to the next slide. I'm really excited about what this potentially represents. We're really talking about the next iteration, if you will, of the internet, and going from scrolling, which is proverbial scrolling, to really more strolling, if you will. Really having a very immersive experience that is a wonderful, wonderful platform for a digitally enhanced experience that goes beyond the traditional boundaries of the screen, that allows us to really seamlessly weave our everyday into much richer engagements that is going to, I believe, really reshape the business landscape, not just today, but also in the future. Ownership will be distributed, and there will be no limitations in terms of how many people we can bring together and really build these deep, rich, engaging experiences to ultimately connect with people and communities. If you go to the next slide, please. Why this is so incredibly exciting is the believed impact that the metaverse is going to bring to us. 90% of business leaders believe that there will be a positive impact within the next 5 to 10 years. When I think about some of the information that we've seen and some of the impacts in our industry, thinking about the post-COVID world, we talk to our HCPs. Our HCPs say they want this hybrid experience. They don't just want a virtual, and they don't just want an in-person. They want it all brought together. And I think that Metaverse is going to do exactly that. It's going to make those experiences much more rich, much more immersive. And when we think about the potential impact of Metaverse on healthcare, clearly a growth driver, and many of us are looking for new ways to engage. We're bringing out incredibly compelling new science. How do we find a better way to connect to customers? And we've really identified 5 areas where we believe that Metaverse is very, very well positioned to really help us get to the next level and drive engagement, drive much more rich experiences, whether it's around medical training or training, really having safer places to build skill and practice, diagnosis from a patient perspective, treatment, cutting across multiple stakeholders, additional training, and then think about the possibilities of remote monitoring. I know I've had the privilege of taking care of many people in my family, and I can really see a brighter future with thinking about how we could apply Metaverse to really have much better, much more precise remote monitoring. If we go to the next slide. But what's really important, and I think Metaverse is really in a continuum, and while it's early days and building blocks are taking shape today and that it's not yet settled, some of the things we know we have to get right, thinking about all of the experience on this panel and what we know we've done in industry so far, when it comes to leading change, there's really some core key competencies and approaches that we need to think about. So the first one is their technology expertise. Thinking about as you approach metaverse, should you be thinking about building a private community or a public community? Really making sure that you're thinking about, what are the technologies and what are the partnerships that we should be thinking about. There are some that are out in front, and then there are others that are follow-ons, but they're catching up quickly. When we think about our transformational operations and processes, this is really, really important. It's all about agility. How do you learn? How do you lead? What are the processes? And how do you think about putting that together in such a way that you're then able to have really the full impact as designed of the promise of metaverse? It really does take putting those processes, those operations together, because metaverse is always on, but at a higher level than some of our quote unquote always on properties today. Really thinking about relevant partnerships. Metaverse holds the promise that we may actually be able to deliver services in environments that are created by others. Think about that. So it really takes partnering to the next level. And within the life sciences, we've got a very, very strong foundation of building excellent partnerships to help us commercialize and to help us bring through treatments to the market. But this is going to be a different type of partnership and a different type of solutioning that we have to do. And then think about what it means in terms of content creation and supply chain. If you're in these truly immersive engagements, this is a very, very different, it's going to have a very different requirement. Think about the personalization. Think about the data that's going to be generated and the insight that's going to be generated. What does it mean for our teams? And how do we think about the above brand, the brand, and then the cross-brand portfolio experiences? And then I'm super excited to have Ashish on the line to really help us think about, from an analytics perspective and KPIs, like there's a lot that's already been established. Should we be using those established metrics and KPIs when we think about metaverse? Or do we need to get new metrics, and how should we be thinking about that? So these are some of the core components that are required for driving change and leadership in any new platform, but in particular for metaverse. If we go to the next slide, really think that there's already some great expertise that's out there and some use cases. So certainly whether it's Nike Land and fostering greater community engagement. Fabricant fashion is really about how you design your own experiences and bring them to life. I don't know about this personally. I've read about it, and I've got a youngster at home who keeps me hip, but it's actually really pretty cool. And I would encourage you to go explore with folks that are out there on it, because you can really, really learn a lot and draw a lot of inspiration. At Indegene, we actually held our first of a kind virtual Meta Digital Council. And that was a lot of learnings from that. And Pfizer, to their credit, Pfizer did some in-game activation using Grand Theft Auto GTA, and really encouraging people to activate and to get themselves vaccinated. This was during COVID. So we're already seeing that there's a lot of adoption, and there's some learnings that are coming with the adoption. If we go to the next slide. Think about let's go the next level down. Think about some of the opportunities that this presents in terms of much more immersive learning and what's possible at a more engaging medical congress. Today, many times physicians have to go to the physical presence, and we know that post-COVID that there's more and more virtual, but it's certainly not at the full possibility as if it were hosted and delivered on Metaverse. If you could please play the video. You can really see that there's a variety and continuum of different immersive experiences that you could really bring to life and extend the impact of the Congress and ultimately the learning environment and the learning opportunity. If we go to the next slide, think about the opportunities that Metaverse provides in terms of a patient simulator. If we were able to go out and really, really think about the very compelling science that we bring, Metaverse offers an opportunity to have more opportunities for HCPs, for our key thought leaders, to really practice and build skill and really be able to refine that HCP and that patient interaction and really think about how they can make sure that their patients are having a really, really great experience, ultimately in service of a better patient outcome. Really think that this is a really, really great big opportunity to really drive greater adoption and also greater utility in a way that hasn't been done so far. If we go to the next slide, think about the opportunity for immersive learning. And Josh is going to talk about this a little bit with the leadership that AstraZeneca has taken in this space. Think about what's possible from like more of an immersive learning perspective. How could you really have very, very rich simulated educational experiences, whether it's in a medical space, whether it's in a field space? We know that the world is changing very, very rapidly, that the pace of medical information is doubling in a faster pace than ever before. In 2010, medical information was doubling at a pace of every 3.5 years. How do you keep up? Metaverse offers a solution that allows you to have a much more immersive and rich educational experience. If you can play the video, please. If we go to the next slide, thinking about what would be possible in terms of building that integrated healthcare community. One of the things we know is that when an HCP needs information, or when a nurse practitioner needs information, they need it because they're dealing with a patient, they're dealing with a situation, they're dealing with a caregiver, and they want that always on, easy to find, easy to access information. And this integrated healthcare community really does offer that opportunity where they could go in and easily find reference studies, identify labeling information, but in a much more rich, immersive way to really make it easier for them to navigate and really have that fully integrated experience, no matter what it is that they're looking for. This offers a really, really nice and immersive experience for the HCPs and for anybody, frankly, that we're trying to serve within our stakeholder ecosystem. If we go to the next slide, there's also an opportunity to really connect key communities, whether it's thought leaders, whether it's key opinion leaders, really bring them together in a fundamentally different way to share information, to really talk about some of the differences and distinctions that they're seeing in the data, to really come together as a community in service of a better outcome for patients. And Metaverse really does offer this opportunity. And again, it's early days, but we're very, very excited by the opportunity that Metaverse holds for us. And if you go to the next slide, we also see a big opportunity from a patient perspective. So when you think about what that patient journey might look like, that patient journey is really about, first you need to define yourself and build that avatar. So think about this as an opportunity. You could decide if you truly want to have a digital twin, or if you want to go out and be somebody completely new and different. But it gives you first have to set up who your avatar is so that you can navigate and that you can then start to connect to communities and to services and to information that's really, really relevant for you. Think about what this could potentially mean and the value that this could unlock. If you are a patient that's in a remote area, if you're a patient that may have some accessibility issues, Metaverse really does offer an opportunity to access worlds that previously may have been off limit, or expertise that may previously have been suboptimal for you. If we go to the next slide, think about if you're a patient and you are trying to get information and we're calling this idea is kind of like, connect with a specialist. How might you better be able to understand what your symptoms are, understand what your condition is, and potentially access somebody that you wouldn't be able to access without being the interface and intermediary of Metaverse, to really find expertise, to find services that will help you achieve your desired health outcome. And then if we go to the next slide, we think about, and while I'm speaking, if you want to play the video, really the opportunity is to develop from a patient perspective these integrated patient communities so that people come together and can share information. They can start to have more feel, like they've got more empathy, They can really, really build these communities, if you will, and support and service each other. These are things we're doing today, but the experience is not as compelling as it could be with these fully immersive 3D experiences that are possible with Metaverse. And if we go to the next slide, I think one of the things that we're really excited about is this idea. When you think about from a patient perspective, many times they need to get trained on, how do they do a subcutaneous injection or how do they manage some more sophisticated delivery. And the metaverse really offers an opportunity to really, really give patients a way to have a much more immersive training experience that could really help them practice with confidence and could also make it much easier for patients to learn and to fully be a part of their disease diagnosis and treatment plan and really be fully empowered. And certainly it's in its early days. There are new forums like the Meta Forums Standards Forum that is out in front, really starting to set what are the standards for privacy. How should we think about interoperability and data exchange? With that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh Chapman, who heads up the excellence in learning for US and global, and talk about an innovative partnership with AstraZeneca in the metaverse space. Josh, take it away.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I really appreciate it. An amazing, intro by you with our blue shirts, and I do think it's funny you do have the black jacket on, which brings this sort of like Hollywood producer, laid back sort of cool. So you get both parts going on at the same time. But thank you so much for having me. We feel honored to be part of it. We started with a big mission at AstraZeneca, which was, and it's probably inspired by a longstanding partnership that we've had with Indegene, which was really valuable. We've used Indegene as a sort of embedded contractor for many years. We have an amazing Indegene lead named Ronell Breeley, who's just our go-to person. And so we have this really long established relationship with Indegene. And as Ronell heard us talking about some of the challenges in the pharmaceutical industry and in training and upskilling sales representatives and first-line sales leaders to go out and make an impact, she was right there with us and realized that she could connect us with Indegene. It was really a pretty fortuitous time because, the Van Gogh exhibit was happening nationally for anyone that's done it. And if you go to the Van Gogh exhibit and you see it, you realize the power of virtual reality and you realize the power of altered reality. And into that moment, sort of metaverse is moving. And it became this amazing opportunity for us. So we were trying to accomplish in a lot of ways two different goals. One was that in our industry, as healthcare is changing, sales representatives had less time in front of the customers to practice. So they had lost a lot of opportunity to be in front of the customers. And we needed to replicate an environment that allowed them to feel close enough to the real thing that they could feel like they were sharpening their skills. The second thing that was a big need for us was this sort of idea of connectivity to the organization. We realized that we could train people virtually over Zoom and Microsoft Teams, and we would get pretty decent results. We would use LMSs to deploy learning content. But what people really missed and what senior leaders came back to us over and over again and said was, we're really missing people coming into, Wilmington for us and feeling connected to the organization and feeling like they're part of a team and part of something special. So it was into that moment that the sort of metaverse appeared for us and helped us sort of close some of those gaps that we were having. If you want to go to the next slide, please. We realized that this was an amazing opportunity to close some qualitative outcomes. I mean, we had the chance to bring people and put them, even for a team building exercise, which we can talk about, down the road, Nancy, but the opportunity to take people, to put them in a room together with all of their new class. And, you're in there with an avatar and it's funny and witty and, you get a lot of laughs just from being thrown into this sort of cartoony situation together. But what we found as we did it was that people really connected and they loved the moment and opportunity to be together, which was a great sort of game changer for us. So that sense of community was increasing. It was fun, engaging. And then on top of it, we've actually been able to go back and this would probably be Ashish's language, but we put some real quantitative outcomes behind it in terms of, is this moving the needle for us? Is this going to help us deliver learning in a way that's more effective? And again, we threw some key considerations on there. I'm sure we'll get to it in the question and answer session. But anybody working in a big company probably thinks, geez, is my IT infrastructure going to support this? So yes, that was a learning for us, and we've enjoyed every part of the pilot. Back to you.
Josh, it's so exciting. I can only imagine that the field was probably like, wow, this is like really amazing to have the opportunity to try something that's cutting edge. And I'm sure that it gave them a much richer experience in terms of their overall training. And thank you so much for sharing the courage and the inspiration. And I'm excited to continue to work with you and learn more as you continue to have more folks come in and use the platform. Ashish, I called you a prognosticator at the very beginning because you've worked in multiple industries and you've led significant change and you've been out in front, being able to say social media is going to be the next big thing. And then when it moved into real world evidence, that's going to be the next thing. And now you've joined us from a healthcare perspective. And so, I'd really love to get your perspective. What are some lessons learned as you think about your career and the opportunity, the lessons that you've learned, and also the opportunity that Metaverse provides? Can you share a little bit of how you think about assessing these new opportunities and lessons learned for driving adoption of new platforms?
Absolutely. And thank you for the opportunity. I'll try to keep up with your Hollywood producer persona and Josh driving the metaverse for learning. Um, so I would say, and Nancy, having come from accidentally getting into artificial intelligence, machine learning early on in my career, I noticed that if you keep it simple and try to stay relevant through the course, on whatever you're driving, whether it is metaverse for whether it is surgical tools or you're trying to introduce it for learning. Um, and while you're doing this, create enough champions who are going to be the primary adopters and expand your adoption cycle while staying compliant and keep an eye on the maturity of the ecosystem, that how the ecosystem is maturing. I remember my master thesis in college was on artificial intelligence, and my project was on an airline onboarding system. But it took 2 decades since then to actually have artificial intelligence on our daily lives. If I look back at like Google Glasses or many other examples where I think those were really cool technologies, but their industrialization took its own course. And if I look at metaverse in healthcare, there are so many applications that are coming up. If you look at even just the FDA approval to a lot of such technologies, there is so much in the pipeline. But if you look at pre 2012, the number of applicants were a lot less. Between 2012 to 2016, it just took a hockey stick curve of number of applications that were submitted. And if I just pay close attention to some of our very premier healthcare institutes across the world, like Mayo Clinic, John Hopkins, or All India Institute of Medical Sciences in India, they all have actually started to adopt as of 2021, 2022 metaverse for surgeries, for diagnosis, different tools. So now we have to just see that how the ecosystem actually evolve and keep up with the needs. Like, for example, to do a metaverse based surgery, you need to have your whole infrastructure on 5G network. And everything needs to connect itself from format, from data, from speed, from acceptance, from readability of those results. Everything needs to be in sync. And that's where I think keeping it simple, keeping relevant, keep preparing champions comes into play. And then I think compliance will be a very big part of it because it's a new area, just like anyone else. When we were starting to mix or read for real world evidence, that was the first time we started to bring very different, diverse data sets. But now we are in a place where everything comes so naturally when it comes to real world evidence. So I look forward to actually seeing a similar smooth maturity in the ecosystem evolving from the past experiences. That's what I would have to say. Back to
Thank
you,
you so
Nancy.
much. Really thoughtful, and I think the point you make about the maturity is really, really important. And sometimes these things take a really, really long time, and developing champions is a really, really important thing to do. And bringing that stakeholder ecosystem together. And you talked about there's some IT stakeholders, there's the business stakeholders, there's finance, there's regulatory. So Josh, when I think about what you had to do, and I imagine what you had to do to get this to go live, do you have any insights or lessons learned in terms of how you thought about bringing people together to Ashish's point in terms of how do you bring them together to get the buy-in to be able to actually go from page to stage?
That's a great question, Nancy. I think one of the things that really was a good learning for us, I mean, we did realize the IT portion of it. And having looked back in retrospect, that would be something we would have probably paid attention to even more in the beginning than we did. We brought in some key stakeholders in our IT world. We, met with learning leaders. We talked with sales and sort of, senior executives within the company and said, this is what we're trying to do. Are you with us on this vision? We think it'll make a difference. We think it'll be a benefit. We got a lot of buy-in by having those conversations early. And I think that's so important in a big organization, right? To get people to acknowledge that what you're trying to do is going to be a meaningful change and worth all the hassle and the challenge of doing it. So we really were thoughtful about, going right to the top in the beginning and making sure that the folks that were, our boss's boss's boss saw the vision of what we were trying to build. And once we did that, we did get a lot of buy-in because I think it's the kind, to Ashish's point, it is a concept that's changing the world. And we do, whether you know a lot about the metaverse or a little bit about the metaverse, everybody knows something at this point. If you're on, if you have a pulse and you're on the internet, you know something about the metaverse out there. So we got a lot of interest in it.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
great. You've given some inspiration in terms of really thinking broadly, making sure that it's not just one level, but that it's all the levels of the organization. And I really loved what you talked about anchoring on the vision. So important to have people anchor on the vision, because if you can all agree on that, then you can work through the details. But if you're not aligned on what the vision is and what the importance is in terms of the expected outcomes, I think you will really struggle to be able to bring people together in service of achieving that vision. So I'm excited to ask the next question to Ashish, because assuming you anchor on the vision and everybody's aligned, one of the things that Metaverse is holding a big promise about is this belief that it's going to have great engagement, that it's going to be able to give us engagement at a whole other level. And I'd be curious your perspective when you think about how we measure engagement and what we look for. What's your perspective in terms of what's possible? We've made a lot of progress and evolved our definition, but what do you think great engagement is going to look like on Metaverse?
So Nancy, I believe that over the past few years, this whole concept of metaverse that we were talking about has really gained a very wide attention from spectrum of, I would say, organizations, industries, people, tech leaders. So I think it is also considered as the next infrastructure for our next generation of internet, whatever that would be. So globally, if I look at it, there are big tech giants. If I look at Microsoft, Tencent, Nvidia, there are gaming companies, robotics companies, Facebook, which is now Meta platform. They're all jumping into this, but not in a very committed way. So my take is that metaverse is continuously evolving right now and improving with each passing day. And its potential applications in the healthcare medical field are also likely to progress. And the expectation that I have is that it simplifies the different healthcare, which are either today very expensive or less affordable to deliver. But with metaverse, we could either make it widely accepted or more effective. So, for example, surgeries or medical education and training, or mental health, or radiology, or pain management. So, while there are solutions, but for some it is not affordable, for some it's not reachable, and for some it's not standardized. So metaverse could actually help in that aspect. So the distances may not matter in case of surgeries, or medical education and training, that something that we learn here in developed countries could easily be transported to developing countries. And the cross learning, because everything is turning into such a cosmopolitan world, so as the human population. So I think mental health, radiology, and pain management, which are common therapy areas, but the learnings may not be common across. And Metaverse could actually bridge that gap widely with speed. So that's how I see the future evolving, that wherever it makes sense, where it is still relevant, where it actually creates a better delivery mechanism, it will thrive and grow and will have a higher adoption.
Yeah, I think that's really important is, unspoken in what you just said is the value of utility, making sure that it is actually really useful. And like you said, solving a gap or bridging a gap where one exists. And I think that those therapy areas around mental health, around some of the surgery, some pain management, really could see very, very rapid adoption. And I think that's a really powerful answer. And what I'm hearing you say as well is that there isn't one definition for engagement, that it's going to continue to evolve and we're going to continue to learn. But I think what's important is that we've got the ability and the willingness to measure and to learn and to share learnings, both from like a metrics, but also from an insights perspective, because there will be some qualitative learnings that come out of it. So Josh, you touched on team building and some lessons that you had learned, and so I'd be curious if you could really kind of help take us through when you're going through the road, the roadmap to get this stood up. You talked about the importance of IT, but how did you approach the commercial leaders to say, hey, training your sales force is a field force is a really, really important thing that you can't mess up. So how did you engage the leadership, and how did you tell us a little bit about the team building and some of the lessons learned along the way?
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, it was interesting for us because I think early on, we imagined using it in two different ways. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, but we did sort of envision, geez, wouldn't it be fantastic to be sort of in a doctor's office to watch like a call with someone that maybe doesn't have the skill yet, and to feel the awkwardness and the tension around that. And that kind of message really resonated with our senior leaders, because they acknowledged and knew that the industry was changing, the landscape is changing, and folks had less time in the field in front of their customers that they once did. So when we said that to them, it really raised everyone's, we got their attention quickly, But we also went along. We in a lot of ways we played on everyone's sort of preconceived notions. I mean, we sort of built a collaborative meeting environment for our teams to get together in a way that matched the lobby of a hotel. Because if you've been in the pharmaceutical industry before, you know that during training, representatives spend a lot of time in the hotel lobby studying, practicing, getting to know each other, hanging out. So we wanted the landscape and the imagery to match what they would do if they were live. Not to mention, we went through a pretty extensive process of building a fake doctor's office and a hallway where you could stand and meet the doctor, and you could stand by the front desk. And so we wanted these 3D immersive environments that match what it would be like in the real world. And as we shared those concepts with key leaders across the organization, everyone got really excited about the opportunity and the potential.
That's really cool. Sorry, I'm having a flashback to Top Gun Maverick. If, for those of you that have seen it, you'll know what I'm talking about, where he's got simulation, right? And he's like doing the simulation, and it's so much more real than like reading a book of like, this is what it's gonna look like. And when I was hearing you describe that I just saw the similarities to that, because I remember what it was like when I was a rep, and you go through all these binders and all this training, and then they send you out there like, and you're gonna have to work the office, and you're like, okay, but imagine if you had simulation and you could actually have these three areas that you'd go work, and you could really practice and you get really, really comfortable and ultimately improve your confidence. So that's
if I could add one, you made me think of one more thing, but I mean, if I could count up the number of pictures we have of senior leaders wearing the VR headsets and trying out, I mean, we've got a million pictures of these folks wearing these headsets, and you think, who is that? Oh, that's the top person in the whole company there.
That's
wearing
so
these
cool.
headsets. So everybody got involved and got interested.
I love how you got everybody comfortable enough to try something new. And like I said, it's early days in Metaverse, and there's some exciting integrations and partnerships that have been announced. And there's possibility that in the future you could do it in a way without the headsets. But I love that people are still embracing and learning. And I think that just is that's a real powerful unlock from a culture perspective. So, Ashish touched on this a little bit before, but curious from when you coming into healthcare and thinking about where healthcare is. In some places we're super innovative, in other places perhaps not. But when you think about the experience you have spanning multiple industries, is there something that is unique about healthcare, or words of wisdom that you'd like to impart to the folks on the call here in terms of like how should we be thinking about transformation and adopting new platforms within healthcare? Are we really that special, or are we more like everybody else and we should just get on with it?
Um, I think the regulatory and compliance umbrella on the industry definitely poses some additional steps to cover. But if I compare with other industries, you look at most of it is driven by needs. And like, for example, COVID pushed healthcare into a situation where always if a patient had an option, they would go and meet the physician in person. But COVID put everybody into a mode where they were okay interacting at a distance. I think if I was to apply the same thing to metaverse, I see that when it comes to attracting an audience for the metaverse and adoption side of it, for example, like if I would the elderly and other who are less tech savvy, will they be able to access the metaverse and receive the best care, or are the metaverse appointments be seen equally beneficial for in-person visit? I think those are answers to be found, and some of it will be necessity driven as the population growth, the cost of healthcare may create options where these options are more attractive and more growth oriented. And similarly, I think on the privacy and security side of the metaverse, I think as this fully connected world, and I think who can tell better than Indegene, like you guys have been leading in omni-channel. So when it comes to connected world, you will see that people will have a growing um, concern and more attention to how my data is being used as I'm adapting to these new devices, new methods, new internet, new intranet. So I think that would be the second area I would say compared to other industries. And the third part I see is the interoperability issues, where I do anticipate that as our infrastructure needs to evolve. Like an example comes to mind is that uh, one of the biometric company that I built, it was a no-brainer solution that most of our biometric solutions on a border security control takes about 8 hours to just run against a criminal database. By the time the most of the passengers are off the airport, and the technology I built, you could have the whole country on a flash drive and you could do it on seconds. But most of the developed countries' response was that we already have something that works. It's going to be very expensive to change the infrastructure. So I actually started my journey with countries who never had any border control systems that were highly technologically evolved. So I sold it to first four African countries to do their elections using my technology. And from the lesson I learned is that the high cost of technology or interoperability issues could prevent you from actually, no matter how good the solution is and how much beneficiary it is, unless that ROI matches the change that it takes or adoption it takes, people may not be open to it. So, so I think sometimes that high cost of technology or interoperability may come in handy as a analysis or insight or analytics around it, I would say. And then lastly, I think we all know that GDPR and HIPAA guidelines around metaverse, they are evolving. I think they will go way further than what we have seen right now. But the good news is that FDA is looking at so many submissions around metaverse solutions. So it is bound to actually evolve and get adopted eventually. So I'm actually more positive than ever about landing in a good place.
I appreciate that, and we're seeing lots of questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to do my best. So, in 30 seconds or less. First question I'm seeing is, what's the single most important use case for Metaverse? So, no wrong answer, but Josh, what do you think? 30 seconds or less. What's the most important use case for audience members that want to get started? What would you tell them to do?
I mean, I think to me, the idea that you can connect people differently is the biggest number one no brainer selling point. It's a huge differentiator.
Thank you. Ashish, what's your take? What's the single most important use case?
I would say strategic collaboration to bridge the knowledge and experience gap across different maturity of ecosystems. So between West and East, or between developed and more developed countries, or institutes like, as I mentioned, Mayo Clinic and John Hopkins and All India Institute of Medical Sciences in India, they are all actually getting onto Metaverse for strategic collaboration, for surgeries, for immersive health experience, or even just co-collaborating from each other's experience. So I think to bridge that gap, that's my single use case.
Okay. All right. Terrific. Super. All right. Next audience question that I'm seeing, and this is kind of a funny one because you brought this one up as well. She talked about Google Glass. World is full of really cool stuff that just didn't quite live up to its promise. So how do we avoid that with Metaverse? 30 seconds or less. What's really important to get right? It doesn't have to be Metaverse specific, but like what are the lessons learned from some of the failures on technology? How do we avoid that?
That's a great
I would
question. Who's up, me or Ashish? You going to Ashish first? Let him answer. He's an expert.
Come on, Ashish, bring it
Okay,
on.
sure.
Seconds.
I would say start with the consumption behavior and then reverse engineer to the problem statement, rather than building something cool and geeky, but not really finding adoption. So keep it simple, start with relevance, and start with the end consumption behavior. If you have that sorted out, it will get adopted. But don't build something because it's cool and geeky.
Love it. Very, very good advice. Josh.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting one. We've lived through this a little bit because one of the challenges we found was that reading a core visual aid in the metaverse is difficult sometimes. It can be blurry. And if you're not able to read the core visual aid, it's going to be really hard to practice and use it. So back to Ashish's point, make sure it can deliver what you need it to deliver before you roll it out in mass and folks have a bad experience.
All right. Well, that is some very, very astute advice. You've heard it here first. Make it simple, make it relevant. Don't follow the cool geeky thing, and make sure it's really, really useful. And don't lose sight of the importance of courage in getting started. So, I would really like to thank both of you for joining me today on a really important topic. And I look forward to continuing to stay in touch with you and drive thought leadership in this important space. So, thank you so much.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you, Nancy, for the
Take care.
opportunity. Thank you, Josh.
Such a
Thank
pleasure.
you. Take care.